we're in Nehemiah chapter 3 and 4, and there's certain aspects of this that you'll see why I'm doing two chapters at once in just a moment, once we get everything together. I do have the timeline again at the beginning of the of your sheet. That's just for your reference. I like to keep this context in place. And come on now. Is this on? No, it's not on. There we go. Okay. So I'd like to keep the historical background in place. So we are now in the year, 445 BC. We are, I guess that's about 90 years, not quite 90 years, 92 years since the first return under Zerubbabel. And in a way, we could call this the third return, but it's not exactly. It's Nehemiah, and we don't know how many people came with him. So there's things they're sort of rebuilding from where they were, but now it's the wall that they want to rebuild. That's Nehemiah's concern. My first point is chapter 3, the workers and their work. I took that title from Tom Constable's notes. And so what I'm going to do here, I guess I put this, I forgot what I put on the slides here. I have my review there already, so we'll just let that show up, all those dates, and then we'll go over to the first 5 verses, I think, of chapter 3. Now, you're going to see, if you keep on reading, you'll see that this is very repetitive. What he's going to be saying is, so-and-so was in charge of this section of law of the wall, so-and-so was in charge of this section, and so forth. We're just going to give you a sample of the chapter. I'm going to read about 10 verses all told. So then Eliashib the high priest arose with his brothers the priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They consecrated the wall to the tower of the 100 and the tower of Hananel. Next to him the men of Jericho built, and next to them Zaccur the son of Imri built. Now the sons of Hassenaah built the fish gate. They laid its beams and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. Next to them Meremoth the son of Uriah the son of Hakkoz probably, made repairs. And next to him Meshullam the son of Berechiah the son of Meshezabel made repairs. Next to him Zadok the son of Baana also made repairs. Moreover, next to him the Tekoites made repairs. But their nobles did not support the work of their masters. So there's that observation. And then we're going to skip all the way down to verse 28, the end of the chapter. Above the horse gate, the priests carried out repairs, each in front of his house. After them, Zadok the son of Immer carried out repairs in front of his house. After him, Shemaiah the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, carried out repairs. After him, Hananiah the son of Shelemiah and Hanan the sixth son of Zalaph repaired another section. After him, Meshullam the son of Berechiah carried out repairs in front of his own quarters. After him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, carried out repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and of the merchants, in front of the inspection gate, and as far as the upper room of the corner. Between the upper room of the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and the merchants carried out repairs. So that's the whole chapter in brief. But the rest of it, between verse 5 and verse 28, they all go along the same. I guess if you had somebody who was acting up in church, you'd ask them to get up and read Nehemiah 3, and they would have all those names to contend with. So that would be the punishment. In Sunday school teachers, you might want to keep that in note. So if somebody's causing trouble, Nehemiah 3, that's your job. All right, so I have this quote here. This is, I think this is actually from me. This is a quote of me. The building of the walls and gates of Jerusalem involved all the people. Nehemiah's strategy was to give prominent people responsibility for their own section of the wall. The description begins with the work at the sheep gate, then progressively describes the other sections of the wall, moving counterclockwise in the description. Now, I'm going to just go over to the next slide. That's the first bit of chapter 4. But I have a little thing of the map there. I think you can see it. That comes from Constable's notes, and you can see that on the back of your sheet if you want to refer to that at all. You can see, now there's a little bit of question how they did that. You see the darker line over the sort of the smaller section, And for sure, he at least covered that much. There's a little bit of debate if he went further to that smaller, narrower line that covers the hill of Zion. So that part with the darker line, they're pretty sure that that was all covered with the new wall. Possibly it went through that longer route, but it does. We're not certain on that. Okay, so a couple of things to note here in the chapter 3. So Eliashib, the high priest, was the grandson of Joshua. So we're 92 years since the first return. Remember, under Zerubbabel and Joshua, or sometimes spelled Jeshua. So he was the priest when they returned. So then Eliashib is Jeshua's grandson. All right, so a little notable person there. Meremoth was the priest who received the temple treasures. I have some references there in Ezra for that one. And then notice in verse, there's a man named Meshullam. He had spoken against Ezra's divorce teaching in chapter 10 and verse 15. He is one who had given his daughter in marriage to Tobiah the Ammonite, Tobiah the Ammonite's son, Jehohanan. All right, so despite his spiritual problems, he took part in the work. So I think that's a little thing to note. People struggle along in their spiritual life. Sometimes they don't live exactly the way God would have them to live, and yet they still want to serve God. And so God is gracious, and he allows him to have a part in this. So then also it says in chapter 6, verse 1, I'll just read that verse right now. It doesn't say that. It's not in, so chapter 6, verse 1, I guess. When it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arab, and to the rest of our enemies that I rebuilt the wall, and that no breach remained in it, although at that time I had not set up the doors and the gates. Okay, so they had built it up, but they had not come to the final stage of construction. So that's something to note. Residences are also built up within and adjacent to particular sections of the wall. So there's several references there. So they're just some things to note about what happened in Nehemiah chapter 3. It's just basically a survey of the work crew, or the supervisors, I guess, the sponsors of each section. You know how sometimes you see on a highway such and such a community group is responsible for the trash in this section of the highway. So that's what they're doing. They're dividing it up, and they're giving people, here, are you getting an opportunity? We'll put your name right here, and you can supervise this area. This is your section. And everybody will know how well it's done, how well you did when we see the result. So there's a little strategery going on there. All right, any comments or questions about chapter 3, Nehemiah chapter 3? Anything that I've said that may confuse you? Because that's easily possible. Okay, so let's move on then to chapter 4. And I'm going to read through to verse 6. So Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1 to verse 6. Now it came about that when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry and mocked the Jews. He spoke in the presence of his brothers and the wealthy men of Samaria and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive the stones from the dusty rubble and even the burned ones?" Now Tobiah the Ammonite was near him, and he said, "Even what they are building, if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down." So that's the ridicule they're getting. "Hear, O God," this is Nehemiah speaking, "hear, O God, O our God, how we are despised. Return their reproach on their own heads, and give them up for plunder in a land of captivity. Do not forgive their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out before you, for they have demoralized the builders." So that's the prayer of Nehemiah. So then verse 6, "So we built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work." So a couple of things to note. Again, we have the Samaritans, Sanballat, the governor of Samaria, and Tobiah, the governor of Ammon. And this is kind of a psychological warfare stage of their opposition. So they're ridicule and derision. And it is, in a way, you think, well, that's foolishness. Their talk is just foolishness. But you look at our political speech and how people talk in our culture. It is they call names, they tell lies, they say so-and-so said this, he didn't say it. You have all kinds of bad things going on when politicians speak. My brother and I, this would be 1978, we were traveling back home from Bob Jones. We took the long way around. We went to Ottawa. Only time I've ever been in Ottawa. And we went to Parliament. And they were having a big fight over a cloture motion. And Pierre Trudeau was the prime minister, and Stanfield was the opposition guy. And it was just, they were going at it. It was quite entertaining. I enjoyed it very much. My brother were going out, I can't believe those are our representatives. But that's what they do every day. That's what they do every day. So here, that's what's going on here. They're using words to try to demoralize the people. And another illustration of this is the mutiny on the Bounty. I read a book on that, and they said it wasn't that Bligh didn't. Captain Bligh did not punish his soldiers with the lash any more than any other captain would. What his issue was the way he talked to his sailors, and the power of the tongue. So it can be very devastating. So we see then is Nehemiah's response. He prays, calls on the Lord to take note, invokes God's wrath on them. But notice the purposeful mind of the people. We had got to the point where it's half its height, for the people had a mind to work. That's a remarkable testimony. They just ignored it and pressed forward. That's what they did. And that's how you handle that kind of criticism. You just carry on doing what God wants you to do. All right. Any comments or questions on that section? Yes, Cal. Yeah. Right. It's just north of Jerusalem. Right. Okay, so it is not as defined at this point as it is later in the time of Jesus. But the Samaritans are the people. They were people, mixed Jewish and Gentile race. They had, as a result of the, let me think now, starts with A, the Assyrian Empire destroying the northern kingdom. So way back, so when the Jews came back from Babylon, so that's mostly the tribe of Judah, but some other tribes, they come back. Well, there's this animosity. There's a difference in religion. They have a sort of I guess you would call it, it's a Jewish cult. Samaritanism is a Jewish cult because they don't accept Moses properly. They're not following Moses according to Moses. So there's that conflict, and then there's also the fact that there's a mixed race thing going on, and there's a lot of, so there's right immediately there's this animosity. Now that continues. We're in 445 BC. So you think about that animosity continuing on for 400 years. You think about that kind of argumentation. Like, the Hatfields and the McCoys were nothing compared to this. This is we were just going at it for 400 years until the time of Christ. And so then when you see Philip going to Samaria and preaching the gospel, that's that is amazing, right? Anyway, so, okay, any other questions on this section? Okay, let's go ahead and read the next bit. So 7 through, I think, 14. Now, when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the repair of the walls of Jerusalem went on and that the breaches began to be closed, they were very angry. All of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause a disturbance in it. But we prayed to our God, and because of them we set up a guard against them day and night. Thus in Judah it was said, the strength of the burden bearers is failing, yet there is much rubbish, and we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. Now that is a poetic verse, that one right there. You'll notice how it's capitalized in the middle. I didn't line it up just for space reasons. I didn't line it up like poetry, but that's how it's set up. If you've got a Bible that does that, makes that distinction. Our enemies said, they will not know or see until we come among them to kill them and put a stop to the work. When the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times they will come up against us from every place where you may turn. Then, verse 13, then I stationed men in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, the exposed places, and I stationed people in families with their swords, spears, and bows. When I saw their fear, I rose and spoke to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Okay, so what's going on here is the threat is intensifying. And it is led by Sanballat and Tobiah, but notice the Arabs, okay, so that's to the south. The Ammonites, that's to the east. And then Ashdodites, that's the Philistines, and that's to the west. So they're basically surrounded. Okay, these are all the nations on every side who are opposing them and what they're doing. All right, and so they make a conspiracy to attack Jerusalem. Now they've heard about it and they pray. Now you'll notice how I have set up on the screen, I have set up verse 10 and 11 and 12 as indented from the others, because basically the way I see those is these are sort of bullet points of things that are being said. It's like this is what's flying around. So the first one, this song, one of the commentaries imagines that as something that the Israelites kind of in their depression were singing as they're building the walls. The strength of the burden bearers is failing, yet there is much rubbish. We ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. Like it's sort of like an Eeyore type song. They're not real thrilled about what's going on. So that's going on in the city. Then we have the plot of the enemy, verse 11. Okay, that's what they're saying. We're going to come and kill them. Okay, and then verse 12, there are Jews who are living in the borderlands, and they're coming. Oh, did you hear? Did you hear? They're making threats against you. You see, so you've got the internal depression, you've got the external pressure, and then you've got, these are allies of yours, but they're coming with all these rumors. They're coming. Okay, so that stokes up the fear. That's what is all. Those three verses are just sort of getting everybody wound up. So this is what Nehemiah does. So he stations men in the weakest parts of the wall, and he encourages them. Don't be afraid of them. Remember our God. Okay, so Nehemiah is a very unique leader. You think about some of the old leaders, the kings of the old earlier in the Old Testament. They're wishy-washy. They go with whichever wind is blowing. They don't have courage. Nehemiah says, "Let's trust God." Okay, that's what he says. Let's just trust God. That's an amazing statement. And it's very, we have all kinds of threats against us in our world. And, and you can you can stand around and talk about that. And you can read all the negative news headlines and all the bad things that are happening. And here's the thing. We can't control that, can we? We can't do anything about that. So let's trust God. God is bigger than all these problems. And let's serve God and keep building our wall. And if we have to, you take care of yourself. But you trust God. That's the approach that he's taking. All right. Any, let's see. Any other comments on this? I think I've covered everything in my notes on that section. Anybody have any comments or questions on that section? Okay. Maureen? Nothing has changed. God, the enemies of God hate God's people. That is the way it is in this world. Okay, so nothing's new. So we have to recognize that, and we're thankful that in our country, at least, there are laws that give us freedom of worship and assembly and so forth. And as long as those laws are on the book, we do have some bulwarks of defense built into our society. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have problems, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to someday maybe have to fight for those freedoms. Fight in the spirit. I don't mean necessarily. We don't see it. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. Otherwise, my servants would fight." Right? The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. Paul says. They're mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. So we trust God. And so if there is something that has to happen, we may have to take legal recourse, whatever might have to happen, but we will. But in the meantime, the main thing is we're going to trust God and pray. That's how we deal with these things. And we should arm ourselves ahead of time. But anyway, this is really an amazing chapter, this one, chapter 4 of Nehemiah. So one last bit of it, and as soon as it shows up here, when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, then all of us returned to the wall, each one to his work. From that day on, half of my servants carried on the work with half of them, while half of them held the spears, the shields, the bows, and the breastplates, and the captains were behind the whole house of Judah. Those who were rebuilding the wall and those who carried burdens took their load with one hand doing the work and the other hand holding a weapon. As for the builders, each wore his sword girded at his side as he built, while the trumpeter stood near me. Now, that's not a real convenient way to build. I'm sure you got a sword hanging down and getting in the way, and you're always adjusting it and trying to build, lifting rocks and whatever it is you're doing. That would not be convenient. All right, so then verse 19, I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated on the wall far from one another. At whatever place you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. Verse 23, so we carried on the work with half of them holding spears from dawn until the stars appeared. At that time I also said to the people, let each man with his servant spend the night within Jerusalem, so they may be a guard for us by night and a laborer by day. So absolutely determined. The last verse says, so neither I, my brothers, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us removed our clothes. Each took his weapon even to the water. Okay, so they were very vigilant in this situation. So in this section, so what happened is that the plotters discovered that their plot was known. So they said, okay, scratch that plan, but there is still a threat. And so they've sort of stood down, the enemies have stood down from their immediate threat, but the people of Israel or Judah are still nervous. And so Nehemiah says, all right, we're going to work as you see described. So certain guys will be standing holding weapons and holding the weapons for the other guy, and he's working, and guys have swords strapped to their bodies while they're working, and they're bearing a watch. And as you see, even at night, they say, we're not going out to our, some of the people were from out of town. Don't go home. Stay here. Sleep here. We'll make a bed for you. And that way there will be a sufficient guard so if somebody were to attack at night. They also, he creates a strategy. There's not enough of us. If they were to attack us on one part of the wall, there's not enough people there to defend us. So we will watch, and wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, you run there. Okay, drop what you're doing, run to where the trumpet is. So he has a strategy for carrying on. And so that's how they do it. And even Nehemiah, notice he himself is heavily involved in the work, as we see at the very end, in his watchfulness for the people and his participation with them in the work and in the watch and in all the care for this matter. All right, I have a couple of quotes to end up with here. The first one is from Brenneman's commentary. He says, Nehemiah and his group of personal helpers set an example for the whole community. As the NIV note indicates, the last phrase, even when he went for water, is difficult in the Hebrew. Literally, it says, a man, his weapon, the water. That's what the Hebrew says. All right? But the intent of the verse is clear. Each one kept himself in constant readiness. I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. All right, then the last one is from Gene Getz in the Bible Knowledge Commentary. He says, Chapter 3 might give the impression that once Nehemiah had carefully assigned everyone to a particular section of the wall, from that time on, everything progressed smoothly. Not so. God's work seldom goes forward without opposition. In fact, as seen in the chart, Nehemiah's problems and his responses, this new leader in Judah faced many problems. All right, so any questions about anything I've said in this last section or even in the whole study tonight? All right, Debbie?
Not a question, but a comment. Some things have changed. That's changed.
What?
We don't have that same kind of steely regard and all out, we're going to be defensive, we're going to be offensive, we're going to be working.
Right, okay, so, Okay, she's saying that the spirit has changed in the church. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I would say.
All right, I would say, I would put it this way. I mean, it's always easy to feel like looking back, oh, the church, things were better in the old days. Okay, that's sort of a fact of life. I think every generation has thought that, and every generation thinks these kids coming up, I mean, they're just no good. Okay, so that's a sort of a norm. But the thing is, there was a time in our, I suppose, within reach of our collective memories, if you've been a Christian for a while, that the church was much more of a missionary church. There were, they called it the 19th century, so the 1800s, they called that the mission century. And started with Adoniram Judson in 1812, going to Burma, and many other missionaries afterwards. A great outpouring of missionary work around the world during that time. And actually we received the blessing of that because some of our folks from Africa, they weren't, Judson wasn't there, but there were missionaries went there and led grandparents and great-grandparents and whoever knows how far back to the Lord. And now here these Christians are coming to fellowship with us. What a blessing that is. And, you go far enough back. I mean, my ancestors were absolute pagans. So somebody led them to the Lord, right? And so there was a period of time in the 1800s where there was a tremendous push in the church for evangelism, worldwide evangelism. Even in the early part of the 20th century, I think there was a real urgency. I think part of that was the experience of fighting the world wars, where Christians really had a burden to get the gospel out and to preach the gospel and to be active. Now we're several generations from that, and we haven't had to fight those kinds of conflicts in the world. And so it is, and we've also had the benefit of prosperity. Our churches are wealthy. Relatively speaking, our people are wealthy. You may say, I don't feel very wealthy. Well, compared to your grandparents, you probably are. Okay, and so there's a tendency then for things to, settle down. We're not going to be quite so zealous. And I do think that when we're reading these chapters like this, it ought to stir us up really spiritually to be faithful servants of God. Now, we're not called in the same kind of context. We're not building physical walls and fighting physical enemies, but we are still called to follow God with the same kind of enthusiasm. So I think that's a point well taken. Yes, Debbie?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, is the twofold working, all out working.
Yes.
But watching.
Yes. Yes, working and watching, absolutely.
Working and watching,
Yeah.
and watching. And, if we have to watch, then we just don't work.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and then and it's funny, as you age, some of us are, our tops are getting more silver than they were, or have nothing on them. And the thing is, you feel like, okay, I'm past my time. Listen, we're never past our time. That's what I think. We're alive, and we have to keep on going for the Lord. All right.
And it's
Okay.
because we don't have any opposition.
Well, we don't have the blatant opposition, I would say.
I think the opposition is more sneaky.
Yes.
And so people are consumed with themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's right.
Because they don't see that there's opposition.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to keep on going. We can keep saying the same things over and over. So anything else, any other comments you'd like to make? I don't want to squelch you, but I am going to squelch you. Okay, any other comments, or Colin?
Well, I was just thinking, like, the attitude towards the Israeli people building, there's a lot of parallels.
There are a lot of parallels in that way, that's right. And they have enemies all around them. You don't know, that's...
The people that are in the area are, when they come back, they
Yeah.
want to do anything they can to stop them.
That's right. It has not changed. And ultimately, that is a continual stance against Israel. That has been true from the day the nation was founded, and it will be true until Jesus comes. So even so, come, Lord Jesus. All right, let's have a word of prayer, and we'll close. Our Father, thank you again for this time. this study. It is so interesting in one sense to review this material, to think about it again, to get it straight in our heads about what Nehemiah was saying. But Lord, I pray that as we consider it, it would be a real challenge to us in our own spiritual lives, that we would be faithful servants of yours in everything that we're doing. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.